Good morning, everyone. My name is Lori Bradner, and we're broadcasting live from the Seminole Lake County Glider Port. Today we are with Tom. Tom Knauff is here, and he is, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did great.
I did. And he is actually here today. Tom, you are going to be providing a safety seminar,
right.
Not only for those that are here, but also for our audience, talking a little bit about safety and some statistics for us. So Tom, without further ado, I'm going to hand it to you, and thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for being here and for this event here. I am going to talk about glider safety, and you'll be seeing as I go through these slides here, and I'd like to get the next slide here if I can. And you guys are on a different slide than I am, unfortunately. There we go. I'm going to go to the next slide. And these are the specific goals that I have for this seminar, and so it's targeting glider pilots in particular, and I'm going to talk about specific issues as it applies to glider safety, and with an attempt to standardize how we do things. This is a quote by Ernest Hemingway talking about safety issues. There's some things that can't be learned quickly, and so we do need to spend the time as pilots to educate ourselves to issues that involve safety. This year, just in February, I produced 2 new textbooks. One's called a Glider Flight Training Manual, which specifically talks about the how to do it, and then this other one is the one that is capturing a lot of attention at this time. It's called Glider Accident Reports, and it's something I got interested in, and it's basically a compilation of statistics of glider accidents occurred, and then the information was gathered by the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board. And what I'm going to do here is talk about some of these glider accidents, and there are 3 categories of accidents that I'm going to target, but very specifically I'll be talking about the launching of a sailplane and the causes of some of the accidents that occur there. I contend that most accidents can be prevented, and you'll see by the data that I've acquired here that most of these accidents really can be prevented by some rather simple things we all know really now. There's not going to be much new here, but I'm going to point out some things that are obviously areas that pilots aren't paying attention to, and you'll see that as we get along here. The NTSB is a big organization, and this lists some of the stuff that they do, and like it's not just aviation, and it's a big professional organization with a lot of experts covering these areas, and these accident reports that I'm going to be talking about are those that are interpreted from the NTSB reports. And I've simplified them down to their basics, and of course almost all accidents have other reasons for them to having occurred. So what I'm going to be doing is just taking it down to the very bare basics here. I found this to be an interesting thing. This is an NTSB thing, and this is all of aviation. In 1996, there was more people killed by mules than there were in aircraft, and I thought that was an interesting statistics. I don't know where these mules are. we got to take care of these mules.
Mules, exactly.
So what we're going to do is talk about this past 10 years, and there's a magazine that's produced down in New Zealand called the Gliding International magazine, and their report showed that there in the past 10 years internationally in gliding we had 461 fatalities, and which of course averages out to 46 per year. And in 2012, the most fatalities in this sport ever occurred, where we had 57 fatalities in 1 year. In the United States, over the last 30 years, I formed this graph, or these numbers here, and you'll see that we've averaged something like six fatalities per year, and that's gliding only. We do have tow pilots that are killed for one reason or other, and they're not included in that number. So this is just purely glider accidents. The next slide shows a more familiar graph, I think. It's the same information in the same graph between 1983 and 2013. And we've averaged 6.7 fatalities per year in this country, just the United States alone. And in 2011 we had 8 fatalities, and I put this in here just to show that these fatalities I'm talking about does not include tow pilots, and we do have tow pilots that are being killed as well. And those pilots, the towing operation, it may not actually have occurred during the actual tow of a glider, but it was a tow plane and a tow pilot involved in launching gliders in some phase of their flight where the tow pilot's been killed as well. Well, this is an interesting slide in that it's kind of expected. It's a bell-shaped curve where, you know, obviously the major activities in sailplanes occurs during the summer months, and I mean, we do fly all year round, but the bulk of our activity is in the summer months, and so you expect the bell-shaped curve on the accidents, and that's what we see in that slide. In many cases, probably most cases, the exact reason an accident occurs, and I would say this is all of aviation or accidents in general, period, the exact cause is unknown, and there are many accidents, especially glider accidents. I think many accidents aren't even reported. If it's a minor incident of some sort, and that minor incident can be pretty serious in nature, but in many cases they're just simply not reported to the National Transportation and Safety Board. The ones that are reported are the ones that are obviously make the news, and so the Transportation Safety Board, the FAA, people learn about these things and then they do their studies. But you just have to recognize there's a lot of, especially minor accidents or incidents that simply are not reported. What I did with these accidents is I went in there and I personally just categorized them into different categories, and based upon the reports, and I came up with these different causes, if you will. The one that surprised me a lot was that first one, where glider pilots have just simply run into mountains, and primarily out on the West Coast, and there's reasons for that we won't have time to get into. I have a lot of experience flying out there as well. And PT3s are premature terminations of the tow, which is basically launching accidents. Something occurs during the first few seconds of flight, whether it's an airplane tow, which we're doing here at this contest, or winch launching. Something occurs early in the launch. Medical reasons. I mean, we have people that have medical problems. Of course, the first thing you think about are heart attacks, right, and strokes and things like that. Stall spin accidents is the one that people assume is the problem, but as you can see by these numbers, it's really not that big a deal, or certainly no more a problem than other things that go on. People fail to put their gliders together properly. Like these gliders are stored in trailers in many cases, and so we have to take them out of the trailers and put them together to go fly. And for whatever reason, pilots don't take the time to make sure they're assembled properly, and therefore the controls aren't hooked up, or a litany of things that can go wrong occur. landing
Reinforces the
accidents.
checklist.
Yeah, the checklist. Yeah, landings, of course, are things that you'd expect, and low altitude turns are a big issue. People don't fly their patterns properly. Landing short is actually a very unusual incident. Landing long, however, is very common. Our glider port, just as a sidebar, our glider port, we've been in business for 40 years, and we have had just hundreds of thousands of flights. I couldn't even begin to guess how many flights have been made there and how many landings have been done. And in all those 40 years, we have had exactly 2 landings short of the runway in all these years. And we have had thousands of people land on our runway and end up at the other end. They don't roll off the end of the runway, but they don't stop where they really intended to go. They end up way down there someplace. And you'll see the same thing here at this contest or any other place that they're flying gliders. And so people tend to, they become so conservative, so concerned about landing too short that they end up landing way too long and they're way too high. Let me see. Mid-air collisions occur, obviously, on some fair number. Showing off, that's the kind of immature behavior you see by some individuals. That's just the nature of who we are as human beings. Off-field landings, that's where we land in some farmer's field someplace. That's not so common that we have fatalities, but it does occur. We've had people flying at extreme high altitudes where their oxygen systems aren't working properly, and they end up, becoming unconscious and then crashing. So, one of the categories that we are really concerned about are things that happen early in the tow, and where the tow rope itself may break, and so that's always a concern, but it's not. It doesn't come out to be a very common occurrence. When you reduce all of that data down to what I call accident reasons, we come up with this non-standard landing pattern turns out to be quite a big factor, and the spacing of the landing pattern. So people fail to have what all pilots recognize as the rectangular flight path, where you have a downwind, base, and final. And that base leg is so critically important. And there's a natural instinct for people to be concerned about being too far away, and therefore they fly too close to the airport on the downwind leg, and they end up with no room for a base leg. And that base leg is extremely critical for making judgments, because if you have a base leg and you make your turn too soon, you recognize you're too close to the landing area, you can then make an adjustment. But without that base leg, you eliminate that possibility. Mountain turbulence, that's obviously an education problem, because we have that fairly large number of people that have had accidents in mountain flying. Rope breaks and all those things that can go wrong on the early part of the launch is an issue. The wing runner, interestingly, not just the pilot's responsible, but you'll see here when we're launching the gliders, there are other people involved. And so you have the tow pilot and you have the pilot of the glider, but then you have somebody running the wing. They attach the rope to the glider, and the wing runner balances the wing and trots off and gives signals. And the wing runner plays or can play an enormous role in the safety of the operation if the wing runner is educated as to what's going on, because the wing runner can catch errors that a pilot might have made, like in the assembly of glider, you get the glider assembled and fail to connect controls properly and things like that. So educating the wing runners is something we need to look at.
Tom, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it sounds like minus the ropes and the tows, everything you're talking about, obviously the statistics might be different, but everything you're talking about as far as safety and some of the issues can translate into motorized aircraft as well.
Absolutely. No. This is
to gliders.
Absolutely. And most glider pilots also fly power planes. And so this absolutely applies. This next category, this next area is the medical reasons, and as we are all getting older, there's medical factors that become involved here, and most of us are aware of our own physical issues as we get older and things that are going on, and those medical reasons are obvious in the accident statistics. And so I could talk for another hour on just that alone. And then, like all of these gliders, you can hear the guys in the background starting them up and whatnot, but earlier this morning many of these people were assembling their gliders, and in the process of assembling it, there's things that have to be connected. Controls are obviously, and other things, and they get rushed, and they fail to use checklists, and the next thing you know, they're out there trying to fly an aircraft that's not really prepared for flight. And so before takeoff, everybody knows about a pre-flight inspection, and but the guys will hurriedly put their gliders together and fail to do some obvious thing that has to be done properly, and the next thing you know, they're trying to launch a glider that is not capable of controlled flight. Tow pilot fatalities is another issue. We watch for the tow pilots, and of course, if the glider gets too high on tow, it could literally lift the tail of the tow plane in the air and drive him right into the ground. And frankly, there's nothing the tow pilot can do about that. It happens so fast that it's unlikely that, like, the tow pilot has a release. He can release that rope.
Okay.
And the rope is specifically designed to break if a certain amount of load is put on it. We want that rope to break for the safety of the tow pilot.
Right.
But if you violate those rules and procedures and processes, then the tow pilot is put at risk. And of course, these tow planes, this full power, no power, full power, no power. It's not, it's not like a regular airplane. So they have their own maintenance issues. And so tow pilots need to be educated to the requirements of the tow plane and the safety issues involved there. And then tow pilots themselves have their own issues with, with the modern society now, with all the things that are going on, and like I listed here accidents that are listed in our list of accidents. Tow planes that have caught fire, and maintenance issues with the tail wheel. And we had one where the tail wheel shimmied so badly the tow pilot got distracted and lost control of the aircraft. And of course, drugs. Frankly, I didn't realize how bad a problem drugs are becoming in all of society, right. But it includes aviation as well, unfortunately. Wow. So. In coming up with all this data that's available to us on the NTSB reports, I try to go, okay, where are we most at risk in our day-to-day flying, and these are now this is just me going through the list and trying to figure out, broad brush categories. And what I came up with is on this next slide here, and this was in 2011, and it turned out landings were 30% of our fatalities. Now, by the way, I should emphasize that accidents alone are not always reported, and the causes of accidents aren't necessarily categorized in the proper way by the NTSB, the FAA. I mean, if nobody's hurt, if an accident occurs where nobody's killed in particular, right. Frankly, the NTSB and the FAA doesn't spend too much time. It's just one individual that did something stupid and had an accident. And so the FAA is not going to, and NTSB, they're not going to spend a lot of time and money going through the same thing over and over again. And so you cannot take a newspaper report, for instance, and assume that was the real reason. So these are broad brush, Tom Knauff
right.
categories of the accident reports that are available to us through the NTSB.
You were looking at the statistics,
exactly.
Basically running a statistical analysis.
And doing that, we discovered that in this 1 year, 2011, we had 15 landing accidents, which accounted for 30% of the reported accidents. We had 27% of the 13 accidents were people hitting mountains, just running into the mountain for whatever reason. And then I have these next three. The launch was 20%, the medical reasons 12%, and things that occurred before the launch, like assembly issues.
Right.
And then we had mid-air collision, which everybody's paranoid about, of course, which is not a big item, as it turns out. But if you take those three that I've highlighted in red here, those three account for 40% of our fatalities. And it's all three of those categories: launch, medical, and before the launch type things where people haven't assembled their glider correctly, that kind of thing, account for an astonishing, to me, the most revealing statistic that I came up with throughout all these studies and all these reports. 40% of our problem is occurring before any of the flying began, or the first few seconds of flight. Like we tend to be, if you go out there and you talk to the pilots themselves, people are so paranoid and concerned about mid-air collisions, for instance, or stall spin. That's another category that people automatically gravitate to. But as it turns out, 40% of our fatalities are occurring because of things that occurred literally before or during the first few seconds of flight. And I found that to be quite an astonishing number.
That sounds like most could be prevented.
Absolutely.
Is that your
Absolutely.
assessment?
Well, when you come, not just the takeoff act, not just those first, but all of these accidents, other than meteoric impact, which I'm not sure has ever happened, I would contend that all of these accidents can be prevented. And people having heart attacks, that can happen to any of us of any age.
Anytime.
And so there are some things that just simply go along with life. But boy, that's a rare occurrence, really. So anyway, I have here on this slide what we need to do, and I think this is the primary message that I try to get across to people, especially flight instructors. But all the pilots need to be aware that there's certain things that they really must concentrate on, and maybe go back and review what they think they know. Take the time to get the textbooks out and reread, and maybe there's a sentence in there that will say, oh yeah, I remember that now. That kind of a aha experience. Mm-hmm. And of course, landing disciplines is one of the biggies, which accounts for by itself 30%. Teach about mountain turbulence. This mountain turbulence thing, and I could go on for another half hour just talking about that. But mountain turbulence is something that we need to be more familiar with, and especially out on the western mountains. There's something different about western mountains compared to eastern mountains, for instance, and that knowledge is available to people if they just simply take the time to do a little bit of reading.
Right.
The PT3s, the premature terminations of the toes, those first few seconds of flight, as you will be seeing out here soon, accounts for such a high percentage of our accidents, and it's totally preventable. And CRM is crew resource management. And so the people not in the cockpit, the other people associated with this process of getting gliders launched, all of those people play a very important role. I mean, it's so easy to recognize that the controls aren't hooked up if you're educated just a little bit, that kind of thing. Medical factors turns out to be a bigger issue than people realize, and I'll just take a moment to talk about an accident that happened at our place. We had an older fellow that had nothing to do with it, but he was an older pilot, very experienced. He owned a high-performance power plane as well as the glider that he was flying, and we were flying. We had a busy soaring day, and he was the last person flying. He calls on the radio he's going to land, right? So as has happened, we all go out and watch, right, to see how he does his landing. And so, yeah, he does. He calls in on the radio, and he enters the IP and the initial point of the landing pattern. He flies the downwind leg perfectly as the spacing's right, the airspeed's right, you can tell. And he does the turn onto base leg, a nice 90-degree turn, professionally well done. And now he's on base leg, and the glider literally goes from straight and level on base leg to straight down like this. The nose of the glider goes down like that and into the trees. I mean, it was absolutely bing bang done. and I knew exactly where he was. He's up on the mountain, but I knew exactly where he was. I grabbed the first aid kit. They called the 911 number,
Right.
and a couple of us drove up there in a hurry, and we were there in a flash. I would say we were probably, I think we did figure it was like 8 minutes the time this happened to the time I got to him. And unfortunately, he hit a tree, a big tree, absolutely head on. Couldn't have hit it harder, and he was 60 feet up in the air. So I couldn't get to him. He was still alive at the moment, and we actually had quite a discussion. He apologized for crashing the glider, and you know, what do you say? And the emergency people came. They didn't have a ladder big enough, and it took them like 20 minutes, which is actually remarkable that they got there that quick. And they got up to him, but he died before they could get him out of the glider. And so what happened?
That's what I was going to say.
That's what happened. And I got to tell you that, in my opinion, the NTSB, the FAA, the newspaper people, the police, and everybody else would absolutely call that a stall spin accident. But we know it was not. Like it was on base leg and normal. Everything was perfectly normal, and the glider went from here to here. And I had never heard of this cause before this accident. It's called a seizure. And a medical seizure is very common, as it turns out. I had no idea how common it is. The accident that occurred that many people still remember was an automobile accident where an elderly man had a seizure out on the West Coast and drove his car through a farmer's market and killed 13 people.
Yes.
Almost everybody remember. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but
Right.
but we all remember those horrific accidents. And what happens in this seizure is your body stiffens up and your arms go like this, and if you have a hold of a control stick, of course, that's what that
Straight
happens,
down.
and your legs go like that. And that's what happened on that accident. And if it wasn't for us witnessing in that, and it wasn't for us insisting on the medical test to reveal what really happened, that would have got categorized as a stall spin. I never knew about seizures before this accident, but I know now, and it's something that we all have to be very aware of as we get older. Okay? As I get older. And so it's a reality, and it's something that I think we need to get more education about. Let me see, where was I? Pilot judgment concepts. I mean, that's a big ticket item in flight training, and in the case of flying gliders, I think in particular, in all of aviation, density, altitude, and also altitude and use of oxygen, that type of thing. Density, altitude comes into play when you're landing at high altitudes. Your airspeed's faster, and
Right.
there's issues that get involved here. These gliders out here on the flight line today, they're flying like I have one of these devices. It's called a FLARM, F-L-A-R-M, and it's an alert system. It's a remarkable thing. There's a picture of it here, and there's a circle, and as we're flying along, if there's another aircraft that comes along with a transponder of any sort and or a similar FLARM device, it will alert us that there is a mid-air collision possibility. And we spend, this device costs like $1,500 to $1,800 to have one of these in our gliders. And many of the gliders here have this device in them. And so what I'm showing here is that we are willing to spend a fair amount of money to protect ourselves from what ends up being a very small percentage of our problem. Only 4% of our fatalities are the result of a mid-air collision. But we are it is such a dramatic thing that you can't deny it's dramatic when you have a mid-air collision. But we are so concerned about that one aspect of flight safety that we're willing to spend a lot of money to help us prevent that. And yet people will not spend $15 to buy a book that will cover all the rest of it.
Right.
And I got to tell you, it's from someone like myself that's been involved in flight safety for decades, it is the most frustrating thing to find people that are just simply unwilling to take the time to get educated to the rest of the story, as someone said.
Right.
So when we look at glider pilots in particular, glider pilots are in aviation in general, in order to do what we do, flying aircraft, you've got to have a certain amount of discretionary income to be able to afford these aircraft, and so that implies that you have a reasonable job, and in order to get the reasonable, that means you've had an education, you're reasonably intelligent, and all of those characteristics that you would assume means that you are an above average human being and would be safe. Right. But the statistics just simply don't show it. By the way, in flying gliders and in aviation in general, I put in here alcohol literally plays no role. Like, it's not like automobile driving where these guys are driving up and down these highways high on alcohol and drugs right. and things like that. And I don't deny that it has to happen sometime, that somebody's flying a glider or an aircraft when they shouldn't be. But it's very unusual, and the community that are in aviation are what I contend to be leadership types, and anyway, they're not the same kind of people that are driving down the highway on my bumper at 3 feet away.
I think they take the responsibility seriously.
Exactly.
They understand.
Exactly.
They take that.
So the question, of course, becomes how the heck do we explain this stuff? And I have some statistics about automobile accidents here, and in automobiles in 2009 we had 41,000 fatalities, and that turns out to be 1 in 6,500 people in this country were killed in an automobile accident. In gliders we had 8 fatalities, but the community is so much smaller, it's 1 in 1,400. Right. So, you know, the fatality rate in our glider activity is extraordinarily high, and it should not be that way, and especially when you look at these people and who we are. When you go out and interview some of the people today and talk to them, you'll discover these are the movers and shakers of society, and yet they're demonstrating that there's something basically wrong, and I contend that basic wrongness is a matter of education.
Right.
The NTSB says that 83% of our accidents are the result of pilot error, and so I have to go through a couple slides to get to this slide here. It talks about the piloting factors, and knowledge is the key. Skills is less so, but it's still a factor. People don't have the skills in order to fly properly, and so there's some supervision that has to go on to tell people when they're not doing things correctly, and that gets to be a broad subject. But all of this information is available in the textbooks if they'll just take the time, spend a couple dollars. You don't have to spend $1,500. You just spend $15 and you get the information that you need in order to do the safety. But I got to tell you, to get people to make that investment in time and money is really a difficult problem. So I think that's about what I have to say about this subject this morning. Is that about the time for you guys?
Yep.
And I think if we could get everybody out there, like today, you're going to see almost a dance going on out here with all the people that are involved between the tow pilots and the crews and launching. It's an amazing choreographed display. And if we can get everybody involved out there to be concentrating on the safety issues, we can do this safely. I'll tell you one fact I think is interesting. We have been teaching people to fly at our school for 43 years. We have had 1 fatality. And that of anybody we've ever trained, there was a guy that had a mid-air collision down in Texas, and I don't know who was at fault. I don't know if it was our guy or the other guy or both of them maybe. I don't know. We've had that 1 fatality, and we had one other individual that broke an ankle when he landed in a farmer's field, and ran into a fence. And that's the only thing that's happened in 43 years. And it's a demonstration. I'm not bragging as much as I am saying it can be done. We're not the only one, by the way. There's lots and lots of places around the country that have an equal or even better safety record. It can be done, but it takes the cooperation.
And I think you said that, you know, at the end of the day, knowledge is power, and that's the most important thing. And Tom, I know that our time is running short, and you are close at the beginning of the grid, you said.
Yeah, I am.
You and Doris are going to be flying, so we certainly wish you a safe flight today.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing you launch. and good luck in the competition today. And thank you for sharing with us and talking to us. Again, this is Lori Bradner with the Florida Aviation Network. We're broadcasting live from the Seminole Lake Glider Port today for the 24th Annual Senior Championships. Tom, I want to say thank you to you again for your information. And could you tell us again one last time the titles of your two books? I know there was a slide earlier.
Oh, there is. And one's called the Glider Flight Training Manual, and that's the big one that it has all the information you need about flying an aircraft. And then there's this new one that I just came up with, Glider Accidents. And they can go to our website and order these.
And what is that website?
By the way, you can get them at most places that sell gliding books, but it's www.eglider, E as Echo, glider.org, O-R-G.
Okay.
And go there, you can order.
Well, that'll be great. Tom, thanks you again, and good luck to you and Dora.
I appreciate it.
And we sure appreciate you. Again, this is Lori Bradner with Florida Aviation Network. Please come join us today. We thank you for tuning in. We're at the Seminole Lake Glider Port for the 24th Annual Senior Championships. Please come join us. We've got a beautiful day for gliding. I think it's starting to warm up, so that means good thermals.
A little northerly wind here. It's a good summer.
Absolutely. That'll be great. We will look forward to it, and thank you so much for joining us.